How's everybody doing? This is 365 Days Towards Racial Change. My name is Tomlin Nyback, and I am glad to be with you again. Thanks for hanging out with us. I don't know, this is day 143, the mark, and very optimistic that this program, this project will see its completion, and I'm very happy for that. What's on my mind right now? I'm going to do this is not going to do a big chunk of videos today. What's on my mind initially is this idea of work and America's addiction to it. It's almost like a religion. I spoke just a few days ago about it being kind of like a religion in the land. We there are so many elements of worship to it, and sacrifice that go on with it. And I bring that up because I'm in a state of mind where I really want to be liberated. I want to be free to really get to this idea of self-determination. I've spoken about it a few times with us here in the videos, but it's starting to become very imperative. I'm starting to understand how some men and women feel when they feel really compelled. Like there's no history, environment has molded them into an individual who now must go and go forth. The training is done, and whatnot. I was online video conferencing with my academic advisor. there's another religious spiritual word. About my finishing my degree in philosophy, and the word commencement came up, and we don't. I know there was a period, a period in my life where we got away from talking about graduation. We don't graduate because graduate implies some type of finality and whatnot, and a better word for academic transition into the real world is commencement. We want to be more in tune with that and think about our certificate, diploma, whatever, is more of a letter to validate some credentials to help us go forth into the world. So I think when I think of Gandhi, King, Malcolm X, Martin Luther, Sister Teresa, right? You think about some of those big, iconic, inexorable figures in the world that went on into their lives, regardless of compensation or pay, that they just had to move forth in a specific direction that was just right for them. They could go no other way. Cost some their lives, some had longevity and all this stuff. But it didn't matter. They didn't look at it. They didn't look at that part because nobody knows exactly how death comes to us. But they were able to say, you know what? I don't care what this world is about, but it's talking about I've got to live my truth or I'm just going to explode. and I'm moving in that direction. As soon as I knock these, and I've got a handful of videos to go, I am feeling excited about what the next 30 days will hold for me after I wrap this up. It's just going to transition and dovetail pretty seamlessly in all this. So where are you at? I notice I see the people following the post pretty regular. Thank you for hanging out. I'm going to regurgitate some of this stuff, and I'm going to look at comments and go back over. But these 365 videos is going to have a great foundation. Maybe I can connect with some of you in the future. I'd like to do that, get some feedback, good or bad. I'm open. I got open mind. But where are you at with these videos? We're gonna, as we wrap up, I see we're into some interesting topics here and getting closer to finishing the project. Some of our current events have lined up and illustrated some of the things we are dealing with here. So it's going to be interesting to see what we're going to cover. We're going to get into some health. Today we're going to talk about a completely different group that is challenged in America. We're doing some black advocacy here, but I'm not ignorant that other groups, even white folks, have their issues with the power structure. Just the power structure just happens to be predominantly white, and what we are doing our best to address it, it really is power. Unfortunately, we can't. I'm personally against the inclusivity and integration aspects. We're going to talk about that again in a couple days too, a couple episodes. But the focus is black people and black experience in America, because that's the group that has, I believe, bore it the most in this land. In America, maybe, right, the Native American experience really dovetails or complements the experience. But I encourage Native Americans to do this very thing. And although I know there's plenty of videos, Native American advocacy videos already out there. But it's interesting, the Native Americans had the land, black people had the labor, and the power group, predominantly white, said, they're not strong enough, organized enough to hold it, manage it, to demand terms. So we're just going to take it. And that is a cycle that repeats in history over and over again. I'm hoping that by the end of this project, we can come away with some better strategies to navigate the system, to glean some of the wealth of resources, to be dominant in our own way in America. I'm inspired to do this work by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. We've read 3 of his books. I'm going to get into more of his material, definitely, as we wrap up. A Black history reader, 101 questions you never thought to ask. Black labor, white wealth, search for power and economic justice, and Dr. Anderson's national plan to empower Black America. Find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and here on YouTube. Behind me, you'll see the hashtag #US2 symbol, Black women having their community and supporting one another. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook experience. If you've got an entrepreneurial mind, go holler at Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School, theblackbusinessschool.com. My man Tyrone Gregory, the self-employed tax guy, can help you out with some business issues as well. I encourage you, we could do a whole nother year or series on this subject alone. The Federal Reserve, World Banks, and we got some intrigue and stuff like that. But The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, I recommend reading that book. Give you some better, clearer understandings of power in the economic orientation. And Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, we've been visiting this. We'll see this maybe again as we wrap up the series. Uncle Tom's Cabin. I find myself and so many other people are like, wow, I thought there was a little pamphlet that floated around at some time period in history, but it turns out it's a fat novel. So I encourage you to go ahead and take some time to read that and absorb some of the things that are printed in that book. We're going to talk about another group today. We're going to talk about the Navajo Indians, Navajo Native Americans, mostly located in Arizona, but they cover 3 of the 4 corners of America. Now, don't hold me to this, but I think the 4 corners are Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. It's the only place on the map where 4 states have their corners meet like that. Well, for some reason, the Navajo Nation couldn't get any in Colorado, so they occupy 3 of the 4 corners. Anyway, you might know them. They became their nation became really popular with that movie Code Talkers, World War II, and how they were enlisted to be part of the network that would talk in code to determine bombing and information for the Allies and stuff. And they were very effective because the Japanese couldn't break their language for one thing, and then their language was in a code. So it was a lot of layers there, so that their communication made American military, Allied military, very strong. If you can listen in on your enemy and know what's going on, that's half the battle right there. So that's watch that movie, you get an idea of what's going on. What is there's some parallels here, and I have no idea what attracted me just to talk about these particular people. Oh, it's the coronavirus. We'll get to that too. But there's some parallels in just the way this nation, um, enlisted their help and all that. And you would think, in America that America would reciprocate some of some of the energy that citizens put into the nation. I mean, you would think that energy would come back 5, 10-fold at least. Um, there'd be some profit, some elevation from investing in America, especially wartime. You're giving the ultimate sacrifice. You only got one life to live, and you go out there to some foreign country, some front, because um, unless maybe you're white, but if you're black or, America represents, all groups around the globe, you know, but, in-house, you're not being treated well, you know, your government domestically does not necessarily have your back, but you're like, I have to go fight because at least it'll be okay for my children and my grandparents and the vulnerable in the nation. It's whatever I'm going to fight is worse than what's going on at home. But you think after that, you think you'd come back and get some relief, get some, the chains would be off, the oppression and racism would disappear. You've gone and risked your life, but there's not much more you can give above that to say you're on board with the nation, but the nation is not reciprocating. That's a big problem. Um, Native Americans go through, the Japanese, if the Chinese went over to fight, blacks, of course, all these people groups going to bat for America, and America always dragging its heels, and it has to have debates and bureaucracy to give relief, socioeconomic relief to individuals that have gone and risked their lives. This will wrap around to the coronavirus eventually, just in relation to the socioeconomic uh, conditions that make the Navajo people, black people, more vulnerable to the virus because of that. Hopefully, I'll get to that. But it's an interesting article I found. I have access to peer-reviewed articles, very important stuff where that certain communities have reviewed. Professors and doctors, educators write articles, send them to that community, and it gets reviewed and validated and things like that. So I ran into this article. Oh, I should have got the author of this. That's bad academics. Anyway, it's called Navajo People and Uranium Mining. And from 1945 to roughly 1988, and this is kind of some of the heyday of the Cold War, atomic development and our bombs and things like that. During those years, those 43 years or so, roughly 13 million tons of uranium was extracted from Navajo land, and that's that three corners, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. Well, the Navajo Nation had been sitting on a great, huge deposit of uranium, and if all that ore went into the Cold War mechanisms and things like that. And I was scratching my head because the uranium, it's a valuable resource and all that. Yet, and the Navajo Nation owns the land or has the rights to that. Yet, I didn't read anything about land rights, um, land use royalties, anything like that. It was just about um, the Navajo men, but mostly, of course, probably went into these places and mined the ore, right? And instead of like, if you get some kind of deposit like that, you find something like that today. Well, that's a wise businessman would say, yeah, whatever, bring your equipment and whatnot. I don't have to lift a finger. You just made my day. I don't have to get labor, anything. Go ahead and mind it. I get this, a super percentage of that. Well, that didn't happen with the Navajo Nation, and it's very sad. Instead, the men went to work, and that always looks so attractive initially. I think about the Pullman car operators. I think I just talked about this yesterday or so, where the black men were um, had the opportunity for a job and some revenue, and it does look attractive. You get some consistent paycheck and all that, and you're crisscrossing the country on a train and all. You just got to serve white people all the time and whatnot. Uh, but that it's just this desperation of trying to find some niche so you can feed a family, buy a home, and kind of live that American experience. Well, the Navajo, it was a job and all this, but they were exposed to the radiation, toxicity, contaminated water. I'm sure wildlife suffered. If you look at a satellite kind of view of the map, it's they're really kind of situated on a giant rock, a big dome. New York State has that kind of topography as well, where there's just in the state there's a huge, almost a monolith, right? And that's where the Navajo Nation was sequestered from all of that history. Um, and as you can imagine, it caused disease, sickness, got passed on to um, children and generations and all that. Um, they had no PPE. It's a long story short. And it was, after things kind of shut down a little bit in 1988, when they, now legal stuff is starting to happen and exposure of what's going on with the Navajo, that kind of shut down the mining aspect, because now they know people need some protective equipment to be exposed to the radiation like that. I encourage you to do a little Google search about things like the Tuskegee um, uh, study, the syphilis study, and all that stuff, and other studies. There's plenty on the internet where white medicine has pressed blacks and disadvantaged groups, into this disadvantaged position to give up their bodies for science and submit to experiments and all that. Very, very sad. We're going to talk about the Hele cells, the immortal cells, from Henrietta Lacks in a couple episodes. But the Native American went through this Navajo Nation, right after World War II and all that, upwards of 800 men, I think I read, were part of this communication network that was an element that really made the Pacific Theater so successful. And to turn around and to be treated this in such a negative way was really sad. On top of that, what compounds the problem in this Navajo experience is I did the math as best I could and adjusted. So, over that 43 or so years, it's roughly, about $1 billion worth of ore coming out of that land, right? And I guess I was attracted just to say and honor these people because in one of the CNN broadcasts did a piece on the Navajo Nation and stuff, and so the coronavirus has their gambling shut down and reservations shut down, and people are exposed, and we know all about that. But so they still don't have a consistent running water, and if that's true, then sewage and sanitation is an issue, um, and all this, and their infrastructure is not in place. Yeah, and maybe the nation has some responsibility for that, but it's like $1 billion worth of industry came out of their soil, and it doesn't seem like they've turned um, that around, right? And part of it, like they definitely didn't participate because they did the work of the mining. So I get that they didn't, they weren't like shareholders in the marketing of uranium. Then that'd be a whole different thing. But it's when you understand business, mineral rights, things like that, you say, man, if that was my land, I would have been wise enough to sign, get some papers, legal rights, and then charge the government and business to come on my land and excavate, mine, you know. So, we got this nation, these people here, the Navajo Nation, still struggling, right? This disproportionate impact of the virus on on poor folks, those going through socioeconomic challenges is very troubling. But it's telling us something about America's way with the people who are without means, people exposed. You know, a big thing about this virus and attacking and fighting it is being consistent with hand washing and all that. And if the people don't have running water, forget about it. At least we could probably safely say that black folks are in a space where there's consistent running water, so they can frequently bathe and whatnot. But the Navajo Nation seems to be, a step below that if they don't have consistent running water on their land and in their space, you know. So I wanted to honor them. I have Native American roots, but a Lenape nation on the East Coast. But so this does touch me a little bit. Don't have any Navajo roots, but it's important just to say again about America's way. It's so tired. Before we hear about these things, and I'm starting to get Dr. Anderson's position about just this problem with sharing wealth, sharing resources, and all that. It's really lopsided. We've really got to do some work around that as a nation. I'm Thomas Nyback. That's day 343 out of the way of 365 days towards racial change. We'll see you next time. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.